Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Erin, and I work in the diabetes team at Diabetes Australia, membership team rather. We are joined by accredited exercise physiologist and credentialed diabetes educator Hayley Nicholson this morning, who will speak about exercise, including setting goals, changing behaviour, and overcoming hurdles. Thanks, Hayley.
Thanks, Erin. Welcome, everybody. So I'm based in Brisbane in Queensland, and I assume we've got people all around the country today, so welcome. The topic today is going to be on staying motivated for exercise. And I understand one of my colleagues down in New South Wales has recently done a topic on home exercise, and there was some examples of what you could do at home. And I thought now might be a good time to sort of spark the interest of trying to keep the momentum going and staying motivated, especially when we set kind of New Year's goals. We kind of sort of peter off a little bit as the year goes on. So I thought this was quite a timely topic. So really hoping to get some questions and comments at the end to see what keeps you on track. So just to start with, Diabetes Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands on which we work and live, and we pay our respect to all elders, past and present. So just as a bit of an overview, excuse me, I will just recap the Australian Physical Activity Guidelines that Matt has done previously, just to sort of set the scene as to how much exercise we're expected to do, how often, what intensity, just so everyone's sort of aware of what those Australian physical activity guidelines are. Then we'll go into what we call SMART goals. So you may have heard of those before. It's basically just an acronym that we use to nut out your goals more specifically, okay? Because I think most of us are very willy-nilly with our goals. It could just be, I want to lose weight or I want to get fitter. But once we start to nut that out a little bit more specifically, you'll find that you'll actually have something to work towards, that's something that's a bit more measurable and a bit more realistic. Also talk about the stages of behavior change. So you might have heard of these before, but we basically go through stages of change, which I guess helps us either make a change or not make a change. So I'll take you through those stages. We'll also go through some of the common barriers to exercise, and happy to hear your input as well if there's anything not on the list that you feel that is a barrier to exercise. Then we'll talk through some strategies for staying motivated. And then just finally, I want to just go through the process as to how you can gain a referral to an accredited exercise physiologist if you would like to do some more one-on-one exercise. And then we'll also have some time for some questions at the end. So how much exercise should we do? And you'll note in that previous slide, it wasn't how much exercise for people living with diabetes, but it's actually the Australian Physical Activity Guidelines. So the same expectations are for myself as well. So probably the number one thing that we want to try and focus on is getting what we call that aerobic exercise into our week. Now, any kind of aerobic exercise is anything that gets your heart rate up for a period of time. So if you think of it, it's mainly activities where you're moving your whole body. So things like walking, swimming, cycling, Zumba, aqua aerobics, line dancing, tennis, anything where you're moving your body continuously and getting your heart rate up is what we would call aerobic, okay? Now, what is generally recommended is at least 30 minutes a day, most days of the week. Now, you might be thinking, well, 30 minutes is actually quite a lot in one chunk, but the research is actually showing us that you can actually break that down across the day. So you might want to do 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon, for example. So if you're currently thinking, oh, Hayley, that is a lot in one go, just remember that you can break that down across the day. I guess I would just say as a bit of a caveat, we still need that intensity there. So when we're talking about moderate intensity, if you think of it like a huff and puff type activity, so let's just say you're going out for a walk. If you're starting to get out of breath, that's probably just a little bit too much. We could probably back off a little bit. And then on the flip side, if you can whistle a tune while you're walking, then we've probably got a little room for improvement as well. So when you're thinking about moderate activity, think about it like being able to talk and walk, but you're certainly not out of breath. So they're the sort of activities that we're looking at. You'll see on the slide there as well, if you feel capable and you can actually do what we call vigorous intensity activity, you'll notice that the requirement is a little less. So 75 to 150 minutes we're looking at would equal doing that 30 minutes most days of the week. So keen if you want to pop some ideas in the chat, what sort of activities you're doing, we can have a look at them at the end. In addition to the aerobic activity, it's also recommended that we do some resistance exercise, preferably 2 to 3 days a week. And if you can do it on non-consecutive days, it just gives your muscles a little bit of time to rest and adapt in between those sessions. Typically, a resistance program would look something like about 8 to 10 different exercises. So that could be some bicep curls, some wall push-ups, some squats, etc. Then you would do those about 10 to 15 times, okay? If you're able to do it more than 15, you're not really working on strength anymore. You're working on endurance. So if you can kind of keep your repetitions around that 10 to 12, 10 to 15, once you've done all those exercises, have a rest, and then you could do a second or a third set. Now, you might also be thinking, oh, well, I don't have a gym membership. How am I going to do these things? You can be very creative with what you've got at home. So anything where you can create some sort of a resistance. So that could be cans of food from your pantry. It could be water bottles filled up with water or sand. Some of you may have those stretchy bands. They can be used as a resistance. Just simply using a chair and your own body weight is also another way that you can perform the resistance activity. Now, what we do know as well is with the research that has occurred, it seems to be that people living with diabetes who do a combination of the aerobic and the resistance training actually have better results with their glucose levels as opposed to someone who just walks or just lifts weight. So I guess you could call it a bit of the sweet spot. If you can do a bit of both, that seems to give you, I guess, best bang for your buck in terms of your exercise and also your blood glucose management. So those two types of activities that we've mentioned, we would call those structured activity. So there's a purpose. So when we go for a swim, the whole idea is to get our heart rate up. When we lift weights, the whole idea is to increase our muscle mass. In addition to the structured exercise, we're actually one of the few countries that actually have what we call sedentary behaviour guidelines as well. So in our Australian physical activity guidelines, it actually suggests in there to break up your long periods of sitting as well. And what we know is even if you do your walk and you do your resistance training, if you then sit for the rest of the day, it almost undoes the work that you've done. So this incidental activity, breaking up the long periods of sitting, is just as important as the walking and the lifting the weights. Okay, so if we can try and do a combination of both, if you think of sitting as the new smoking, we know that if we sit for long periods, it has some detrimental effects to our health. So if we were to sort of summarize this into a bit of a table, on the left-hand side there, you've got what we call the FIT principle. So what that stands for is frequency, intensity, time, and type. Okay, and then you can see the 3 types of activities that are listed across the table. So when we're talking about the aerobic activity, so that's your walking, swimming, bike riding, etc., we're aiming for about 5 to 7 days per week at a moderate intensity. Now you will see a little acronym there, RPE. That actually stands for ratings of perceived exertion. So if you think of it like a scale of 1 to 10, and when you're out exercising, have a think about how hard am I working now? Am I lightly puffing? Am I able to still talk and walk, but I feel like I'm doing something? That would probably be around the 5 out of 10. If you're getting up towards, oh, I'm really gasping for air and I can't really maintain what I'm doing, then you might be up the top of the scale, okay? So sort of aiming around that sort of 4 out of 10 would be something that you'll be able to sustain for the 30 minutes or longer. The resistance training, you can see there, the 2 to 3 days per week. Same thing, you want to aim for a moderate intensity. We've got the exercises and the repetitions listed there as well, and also some examples of what you could use. So yeah, don't be discouraged with this resistance training. You don't need a gym membership to participate. You can just use things around the home or your own body weight as well. And then finally, in the right-hand column, you've got the incidental activity. So this is, if you think of it, it's just all the stuff that we do in between. So it's taking the stairs, doing the shopping, doing the housework, mowing the lawn, all the stuff that we just do, second nature around the home and around when we're out and about. If you think of it as the activity that's clocking up steps, okay, it's creating movement across the day, but it's often not long enough to get your heart rate up. So we would call it incidental, okay? So feel free to take a picture of that slide too. That might be something just to sort of come back to later, just as an overview of what we're sort of looking at. And as I said, these are the Australian physical activity guidelines. So this is the same for all Australians, Australian adults, I should say. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully some of you are working towards that. Some of you may already be reaching that amount of activity. So I just want to go into, I guess, the importance of goal setting, because it's very easy to sort of go back to old behaviors. If something hasn't become a habit, it could be a number of things. It could be something you just don't enjoy doing. So it's the reason why you don't do it. So if we can set some goals, that will sort of help you with your drive and also keep you motivated to keep going. And what we do know is research has shown that people who actually write their goals down are about 42% more likely to achieve those goals than those who don't. And I think if you've ever been to a dietitian to write down the amount of food that you eat, like a food diary, I think we generally underestimate how much we eat. It's not until you actually write it down that you think, oh, I've actually eaten a lot of food today. And similarly with exercise, we tend to underestimate how much exercise we do as well. So if you're very much a visual person, sometimes writing your goals down, it's almost like making a contract with yourself if you think about it like that. So I guess, how can we maximize our success rate? And keen to hear if anything has worked for you in particular. Some of you may have heard of what we call SMART goals. So it stands for specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, relevant or sometimes realistic, you might see as well. And it also has a time frame. So for example, if someone said, I want to lose weight, we haven't really been specific about how much we want to lose, in what time period, how we're going to measure it, and what sort of support we might need around that. On the flip side too, we don't want to be too ambitious with our goals as well. It would be like me saying, I want to lose 10 kilos by this Sunday. That's not going to happen, okay? So we need to be very realistic because you want to set yourself up for success, okay? And that's where sometimes people can go wrong when they're setting their goals. You really need to have a think about, is this actually something I can achieve in the time frame that I have set? So these would be some examples of SMART goals. So the first one there, I want to reduce my weight by 5 kilograms in the next 6 months. So we've set how much we want to lose. We've set a time frame. Now we haven't really said how we're going to measure that, but that would ideally be weighing yourself on the scales, or you might even want to measure your waist circumference. That could be another way to measure it as well. Likewise, in the second example there, it could be that you want to reduce your waist by 10 centimeters in a 12-month period. Now, when it comes to weight loss, you might hear a lot about, some people can lose 1 kilo a week. That's actually quite difficult. So just make sure when you're setting a weight loss goal that you're being reasonable and it is achievable for yourself. The next one down, I want to reach 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise 5 days per week. So that's one of our physical activity guidelines, that we want to be able to do 30 minutes 5 days a week. So this person might currently be doing 2 walks a week, but they're actually trying to increase that to the 5 days per week. So we've got something we can measure, and we've also got a time frame there as well. The last one there, it could be that you want to reduce your HbA1c, which is the blood test that you have for your diabetes. You might want to reduce that to less than 7% in the next 3 months, okay? And typically your HbA1c would be measured every 3, 6, or 12 months, depending on what your doctor suggests. So they would just be some examples of some SMART goals. Happy for you to pop some more in the chat if you think you could come up with one as well. In order to do this goal setting appropriately, it does really come down to where you're at in terms of how motivated you are to change. Some of you may have seen this before. It's what we call the stages of behavior change. And you'll find that we actually go through these without even thinking about it. So the first stage down the bottom there is what we call pre-contemplation. So this is the stage where people, they're not necessarily considering change. They're often unaware of what they need to change. So there's usually no, I guess, action in this type of phase. When we get to the contemplation, this is where people are actually starting to think about, okay, what are the pros and cons? Is this actually going to benefit me if I change this behavior? So people are starting to contemplate, and they're starting to think, okay, maybe this is something that I would like to change. The preparation part would be actually getting ready. Okay, so maybe setting a date for something that you want to achieve. Maybe getting all the resources that you need in order to be successful. That would all come into the preparation phase. When it comes to action, this is where you're actually putting it into place. So you're actually starting to make some changes, okay? And then the maintenance phase is typically when you've been doing the behavior for, let's say, 3 months or so. This is when it's sort of become a habit. So you're maintaining that habit. Just be aware, though, that we can relapse at any point during this stages of behavior change. So we'll talk about that in a second, but we're all human. Things happen. Christmas happens and we eat more. Easter happens and we eat more. We go on holidays and we don't exercise as much, perhaps. So things can happen during these stages of change. So if I use an example with you now, let's just say someone wants to quit smoking. So the pre-contemplation would be no intention. Nope, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. They're not really aware of how it affects their health, and they're just not motivated to change anything. Contemplation would be, okay, Johnny next door stopped smoking and he's actually feeling a lot better and he's able to walk more. So people are starting to do a little bit of research that, oh, if I actually give up smoking, I might be able to breathe a little better, and my blood pressure might come down, things like that. The preparation would be perhaps that person making an appointment with their doctor to think about, is there nicotine patches or hypnotism or whatever it is that they're going to try. They're actually preparing to make some actions. The action phase would be they're actually starting to reduce their cigarette intake. Okay, and then the maintenance would be that perhaps they've stopped within that 3-month period, and the whole goal now is to maintain that behavior. Similarly, I've got another example here when it comes to exercise. So the pre-contemplation could be no interest in increasing physical activity. This person just doesn't see the point. They're happy doing what they're doing. If they then move into the contemplation stage of behavior change, this is where they're starting to weigh up the pros and cons. So if I do walk a bit more, maybe my weight will come down. Maybe my blood pressure will improve. Maybe my glucose levels will improve. So they're starting to think about, okay, what would be the benefit of me to increase my physical activity? The preparation phase would be this person actually beginning to walk. So maybe they're doing it twice a week and they're just going to build up. reduction phase would be they're starting to get to that 30 minutes most days of the week. And then the maintenance phase would be they've actually been able to maintain this routine for more than 3 months. So we would say it's become a habit now. So it's just a way of life that they've come to reach this goal, and now this is the new behavior. However, some people will relapse. And as I said, we're all human. Life throws us challenges when we least expect it. We do have those challenges that are sort of coming all the time. So the Christmas and the Easter and the birthdays and all that sort of thing. But just know that it is a natural part of change. Don't beat yourself up. If you do happen to fall off the bandwagon, you can just start back down at that contemplation stage and just work your way back up. Okay, so don't get discouraged. It is important to just perhaps reset your goals. Perhaps you did fall off the bandwagon because we were a bit ambitious. Maybe we set a goal that actually wasn't really achievable. Okay, so just be kind to yourself if this does happen. But most importantly, I guess we just want to work out, well, why did it happen? What would be some of the barriers for us to exercise? And then coming up with some strategies so that we are successful in the future. So I've put together a bit of a list of, I guess, some of the most common things that I hear from people as to why they don't exercise. So I'm just going to let you mull over this list for a little bit. Have a look on that slide, see if there's anything there that you particularly relate to. I would have to say probably the main reason I hear why people don't exercise is the lack of time. But I think we do have time. Like, for example, you guys have made time today to come to this webinar. So you've showed up. I've showed up. It was in my diary. So we've made time for this. It's very similar to your exercise. We just sort of have to make time, really. Some people, it's the reduced motivation. And if I had a little potion I could give you all to increase your motivation, I would give it to you, but I don't have one. So sometimes we have to think about what actually motivates us. And I'll give you some examples later of where maybe some of that doesn't work and where some of it does work. Some people have a fear of hypos. This is a legitimate concern. So particularly if you use insulin or you are taking glycoside or diamicron for your diabetes, you are at increased risk of dropping low. So for some people, that is a legitimate fear that, they don't really feel comfortable exercising because they've dropped low in the past. And that might be that we just have to come up with some strategies to avoid that happening. Same with the injury, illness, and pain. So we've got people out there who don't just have diabetes. You may have had a hip replacement recently, or you've got chronic lower back pain, or you have asthma, which impacts on your exercise. So these are all very legitimate things that people are dealing with. So I'm hoping I can give you some strategies today as to how you can work around that. Now we've got the good old weather. And I have to say, any of you that are in Brisbane, we've had a bit of a rotten start to the year with rain on the weekends particularly, but also we have the heat as well that we have to deal with. So we'll come up with some strategies as to how you can work around the weather. For some people, cost is an issue. I'm hoping I can kind of get the message across to you today that we don't have to spend a lot of money to exercise, but for some people that is a concern, or even access to facilities that can be a concern as well. And then the last one I've got down there is the lack of equipment. But again, we don't need too much equipment to do exercise, so we'll come up with a few strategies. Happy for you to pop some more ideas in the chat, and I can't see them at the moment, but we'll have a look at them at the end. So let's start with the lack of time and the reduced motivation. I reckon these are probably the two most common barriers for people exercising. So when it comes to time, schedule it in, just like you've done with this webinar today. You probably popped it in your diary, or you got the meeting request from Erin. It's gone into your diary, so you've turned up. Okay, so we know that that works. When people actually schedule it in to your diary, that's usually quite successful. Some people also like to set reminders. So if you're pretty savvy with your phone, you can set some alarms on there. So it reminds you to, go for the walk at 8 o'clock or whatever it might be. Remember also when we were talking about the exercise guidelines, you don't have to do it all in one go. So have a think about if you're still quite busy, perhaps you're still working full time, perhaps, then maybe putting shorter chunks of exercise into your day might actually be a more achievable way of approaching it. Sometimes waking up earlier can be a good way of doing it as well. A lot of people ask me, what is the best time to exercise? Pretty much the best time is when you will exercise. So if morning is good, go with the morning. If you only have the afternoon available, afternoon is fine as well. Okay. But what we do find with diabetes is some people get what we call the dawn phenomenon, where their glucose is slightly higher in the mornings. So that's why a lot of people do like to pair their exercise in the morning, because they can kind of dub that little peak that often happens first thing in the morning. When it comes to reduced motivation, sometimes simply just doing your exercise with a friend or a group can actually be a really great way to keep you accountable and motivated. So if you're going walking with Mary at 7 a.m. every day, if Mary calls you and says, I'm not walking today, are you still going to go walking? So sometimes having that friend or someone to go with can be a benefit, but also just having that innate motivation of having a think about why. Why are you actually doing this walk? Sometimes rewarding yourself can be helpful as well. Careful what you reward yourself. Sometimes people tell me chocolate and things like that they reward themselves with, but have a think about things like maybe rewarding yourself with popping some money in the holiday fund or having a massage or buying a new book or whatever it might be. Have a think about once you've achieved your goal, what could you actually reward yourself with? I can't stress the third point there enough. Do something you enjoy. I can stand here today and say, okay, everyone has to start swimming. But if you don't like swimming or you don't have access to a pool, that's not going to be a viable motivation strategy. Okay, so find something that you really enjoy, and that will help you to make that a habit. And also group exercise. There's so many group exercise opportunities. So there's the Heart Foundation walks. A lot of the councils, I know our Brisbane City Council here has like free Tai Chi in the park. Over summer, we often have $2 entry into the local pools. So have a look around. You'll also find when you do something in a group, it's often more cost effective too. There might just be a small fee to participate. So have a think about that. The other thing that I didn't put on the slide there, which I think is also important, is actually knowing your why. Why are you actually going for that walk? What's actually motivating you? So an example I can give you is when I graduated from uni, I worked in a cardiac rehabilitation program. So I was working with people who'd had bypass surgery and stents and pacemakers. And a lot of people would tell me that they're motivated by fear of having to have that surgery again or, have something done. And I would say to them, just remember that fear does dissipate over time. The longer you get away from that surgery, that fear actually dissipates. So have a think, I guess, beyond that. What are some other motivational factors? Is it that you want to, keep up with the grandchildren, or you just want to be able to maintain your independence and climb stairs and do everything that you do? So just know your why. Why are you actually doing your exercise? I think you'll find that will also help you to stay on track. Now, when it comes to injury, illness, and pain, as I said, these are really legitimate concerns for some people. So let's just say that you, I don't know, let's just say we sprained our ankle tomorrow. That doesn't mean we can't do anything. Okay, we've still got functioning arms that we can do some perhaps resistance training, but it could be that the lower body activities are out for a little bit while you recover. So you may just need to amend your program. It may also mean that you might just need some extra rest periods. So if you've got a current injury or a pain, then perhaps we just need to do shorter bouts of activity. You could also look at reducing the intensity and the time that you're exercising. That could still help you keep on track. And then hopefully everyone is aware that you can actually see an accredited exercise physiologist or a physio through your diabetes care plan. So if you did feel that you needed more one-on-one assistance, you can actually get that through your care plan. Same thing with the fear of hypo. So really with this one, it just comes down to preparation and planning, okay? Because we know that with exercise, generally your glucose levels come down. So that's sort of a known, but I guess we just need to make sure that you're just not dropping too low. So it might be that you need to check your glucose levels more regularly, particularly if it's a new type of activity that you haven't done before. It also might mean having a snack before you exercise, so that you've got a little bit more carbohydrate on board for you to use up as fuel. You may also need to consider changes to your medication, particularly if you use insulin. You might find that, a 60-minute walk is enough to drop your glucose quite a bit, so you might not need as much insulin at that time. And when you are choosing some snacks, try and choose the low GI foods where possible, because they're going to sustain you for a little bit longer. And of course, having your hypo treatment available would also be a good idea. So that could be jelly beans, juice, soft drink, those kind of things that will get the level up quickly, but also just have something that you can eat that will sustain you a little bit longer. The cost and lack of equipment, as I said, by joining a group type of program, often that can reduce the cost. So that could be a really good option. I know things like the Heart Foundation walks, they're free. I think they're national. I'm pretty sure they're national. I know in Brisbane, they're across a lot of the Westfield shopping centres. So they are air conditioned, they're flat, they're safe. So often that's a really good option for people. And I do believe they have coffee after. With the home exercise options, you could just, on those days where it's, a bit wet outside, or, it's not possible to do what you would like to do, just remember that there's lots of things you can do in and around your home, using those cans of food, water bottles, etc. And just remember, you've always got your body weight that you can use. So something like a squat or a lunge or a wall push-up, that's a type of activity that you can use and you don't need any equipment. The weather, this is probably a big one. This is when people do sort of fall off the bandwagon a little bit, when we have long periods of heat or rain. Try and exercise in the cooler parts of the day if you can. We know that with diabetes and hydration, if you're a bit dehydrated, your glucose levels tend to be a bit higher. So just trying to keep water up as well. Also dressing for the weather, so trying to choose clothes that breathe, maybe layer in winter so you can take layers off if you need. You could also consider indoor exercise options. I know since we've had COVID, there's a lot of online exercise now. One thing I will just say though, when you're listening to one of those recordings, just remember that they don't know, if you have asthma or you've got a dodgy knee or whatever. So just err on the side of caution if you're going to participate in any of those online type exercises. And then I mentioned the hydration as well, very important. So I'm hoping that's giving you a few strategies to think about with your current circumstances. I just wanted to give you a little plug for the accredited exercise physiologist as well. So you can actually click on that link. You can pop in your suburb and a 10K radius, and it'll tell you who's in your local area. It is covered by your diabetes care plan. So remember, you've got those 5 sessions per calendar year. So you may want to use 1 or 2 for the EP, along with, podiatry or diabetes educator, whoever you would like to use. So just know that that's available. There is also another program through Medicare. It's called a a group allied health type 2 referral where you can have 8 sessions with an exercise physiologist as well. Some of you might also be aware through the NDSS, we also offer what we call a Beat It program, which is funded by NDSS. That's also another option if you're looking to engage in a bit more supervised exercise. So I guess my take-home message is, most importantly, do something that you enjoy because you're more likely to keep at that, okay? Set some SMART goals. I think that keeps us all motivated. And even if it's quite a large goal, have some smaller goals towards that larger one. That will also keep you on track. And just make small changes and celebrate the wins along the way, because if you've got quite a large goal that you're trying to achieve, it is important to sort of celebrate your progress towards the goal as well. So I hope that's been useful today. We'll open it up to questions, and I might stop sharing my screen, Erin, and I'll see if I can see the questions. Oh, I can actually see them now.
So it looks like there's the one, Michael's question from earlier on. I'm not sure if there's any exercise related questions, but people can, as I said, put their hand up if they want to be taken off mute or take themselves off mute.
Yeah, no problem. All right, I'll have a look at this one from Michael. So I find my CGM very frustrating to use during any exercise as the results can change dramatically from minute to minute. Yes, that can happen. I realize that there can be a huge gap for results on my CGM after topping up with glucose. Find a CGM best when I'm asleep. Interesting. Okay. So you're right. So when you're wearing the CGM, it's important to know that it's actually in the interstitial fluid. So it's not in the blood glucose, so to speak. It can be a little bit of a lag between the CGM and also a finger prick. And a finger prick will always be the gold standard. That will be your gold standard glucose result. You're right, though, when you have some glucose, you will see those changes. Whereas if you were just to do a finger prick, it's only giving us 1 millisecond of time, I guess. It's only telling us what's happening then and there. But I would say, Michael, the benefit of having the CGM is it does give you that trend arrow. So it will tell you whether you're going up quickly, going down quickly, or plateauing with the level. So if you have had a few issues with it, perhaps even contact the manufacturer if you think things aren't quite right. But it's very common for things to change depending on the intensity of your exercise as well. But happy for you to unmute, Michael, if you want to add to that, if there's anything else that you wanted to ask. No, that's okay. Does anyone else have any other questions at all?
I might just say, in case anyone's not aware, that you need to take yourselves off mute. You should be able to click the mic button to remove yourselves from mute if you're able to, if you're interested in asking a question.
Yeah, feel free to pop yourself off mute or type it in the box. I can see those now as well.
And apologies, I clearly read the first few words of Michael's question because it's definitely exercise related.
No, that's fine. That's all good.
People can also send an email. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even if you have any comments at all, like what's worked for you, very keen to hear, and I can share it with the group. Like what keeps you motivated to exercise? What helps one person doesn't help another. So I'm very keen to hear if anyone has anything to add there. Okay, so someone has actually put a comment in there that they highly recommend the Beat It program. Yeah, I actually deliver these myself in Queensland, and I can't recommend them enough either. You basically have an initial assessment with an exercise physiologist, and then you attend twice a week for 8 weeks, usually with a group up to 12 people. That would be the maximum. And in addition to the exercise, there's also some education within that 8 weeks as well. So all covered by NDSS. They're very popular. So if you do want to get involved, just make sure you put your name on the list sooner rather than later. But yes, definitely recommend the Beat It program. So I've got a question here from Lewis. When is the best time to exercise for both type 1 or type 2? Yes, it's an interesting one, Lewis. What I often suggest to people is get familiar with what your glucose levels do throughout the day. And I would use exercise to your advantage. So if you find that, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you start to creep up a little bit, that would be a perfect time to do your exercise. But a lot of people will do it in the morning just because it's done, tick. We've started a routine and it's a good start to your day. So it doesn't really matter which time of day, but I would definitely avoid times where you know that you're low, and I would increase opportunities for exercise when you're just a little bit higher. So I hope that helps. Any other questions at all?
Actually, I had a question. Is it important to, if you've got a larger goal, so for me, for example, after having my son, like I've definitely got weight that I'd like to lose. Is it important to kind of say, I want to lose 5 kilos by this time, and then once you get there, another 5 kilos? Or is it better at the beginning to be like, I want to lose 20 kilos?
I think set the long-term goal, Erin, of whatever that might be, but also set time points. Probably a month is a good time period. So within a month, what would you expect? And it's also a good opportunity to see if you're on track, because let's just say you want to lose 10 kilos in 6 months, for example. If you've got to the 1 month point and there's been no change, then you probably have to look at, okay, what do I need to change? Is it food side of things or exercise? So I totally agree. I think it's good to have the smaller goals working towards the larger goal, especially when it comes to weight loss, because when people want to lose a lot of weight, we have to allow quite a bit of time for that to happen. But you also got to keep motivated across the month. So I think setting a 1 month kind of check-in towards your goal, that's a good way. And also rewarding yourself when you get that, when you lose 2 kilos, celebrate and do something fun. Yep, good question.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other questions at all? Can't see any more here, Erin. Oh, actually, hang on. Maybe one more's gone in. Okay, so we've just got an add-on from Lewis's question. So if you do exercise in the morning and say bring your level way down, can you then splurge on a big breakfast? Example, French toast with maple syrup. Or is the up and downs detrimental? I love that, Lewis. That's great. So probably not splurging. But I guess just like I said, using it to your advantage. So especially if you're a creature of habit and you eat the same thing every day, that's a really good way to know exactly what's happening. But when you want to have something like that, like the French toast or whatever, maybe have that first and then go for the walk after, because remember, things like maple syrup, that's going to make your level go up. So if you pair your exercise, shortly after, let's say within an hour, instead of your glucose going this level, it might actually come down a little bit. So yeah, you can still have those things, absolutely. But yeah, just trying to use exercise to your advantage to keep it as level as possible, because every time we have a spike for an extended period of time, your pancreas has to work a bit harder to get that down, because that's what it naturally wants to do. It wants to keep everything in an equilibrium. So if we're throwing things at it like French toast with maple syrup every now and again, no big deal. But if we have that often, it just means your pancreas has to work, just that little bit harder to keep things in check. But you can still have the French toast every now and again. Yep. Okay, I've got a question here from Joe. How long does it take, excuse me, how long does it take for it to be considered a habit? Just something you do, where the brain doesn't search for the excuse every morning to not exercise? Yeah, generally speaking, it takes at least 6 weeks to develop a habit. And I reckon personally a 3-month period is a really good time. If you've been doing something for 3 months, that tells me that, that's just an innate habit. But generally speaking, it can take about 6 weeks to, make a solid change. Yep. And if you're finding you are coming up with excuses, Jo, as you say in your question, have a think about, well, is the exercise you're doing actually a good option? Maybe you got to try something else that's more enjoyable, maybe something you can do with a friend. That could be something to consider as well. Can't see anything else there, Erin. Unless there's any on your end.
No, that looks like Jo's the last question in the chats. Oh, there looks like there's another one now in the Q&A.
Oh, yeah. Lewis is saying, thank you. Given my elderly mother a Libre Sensor 2 has the type 2, and this has really helped her understand her diet. Highly recommend it. Yeah. For example, you can have 3 beers and hardly any changes. And 2-minute noodles can go crazy. But how would you know that if you pricked yourself at different times? Yeah, and I guess that's the benefit of having the CGM, because you're getting that real-time information. And it is really good tool to give you feedback on food in particular. I guess the only thing at the moment is the CGMs are not subsidized for people living with type 2 diabetes, so it can be quite costly. But I do know of people who maybe buy them, 2 or 3 times a year, just so they can kind of have 2-week periods where they can see what's happening. Hopefully, I mean, we are advocating for this. Hopefully in time, it will be expanded to other people living with diabetes. But yeah, they're a really good tool. Very good tool. Also, Michael's just added there, I do find it a hassle regarding gauging my insulin the day after work or exercise. Yeah. And the thing with exercise, Michael, is with every bout of activity you do, your muscles are still drawing up glucose even after you finish exercising. And that's why some people will have what we call nocturnal hypos, especially if you exercise in the afternoon and you drop low while you're sleeping. So the one thing I would suggest is if you can work with an exercise physiologist who's also a diabetes educator, that would be perfect, to help you work out gauging how much you might need to reduce it. But I guess the other thing is too, just having like a low GI snack. The last thing we want you to do is just to eat up to your insulin. We'd rather you just reduce the insulin and eat, normal food. But yeah, just see if you can work with your diabetes educator to see if you can. It is a bit of an experiment, I'm going to be honest. It's a bit of an experiment. And as you know, you can do one thing on Monday, the same thing on Tuesday, and you have a different response. And that could be purely hydration, stress, lots of other things that affect your glucose levels. Yep. Yeah, so appreciate that it can be a bit complicated with the insulin, but it is possible. And that's why I would say if you can have a habit where you do things the same time of day, at least then you kind of can anticipate what's going to happen. Yep. Yeah, good point. Okay.
All right,
Thanks
we
so
might
much.
finish a bit early.
Yeah, thanks, Erin.
Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. You can send an email to united@diabetesaustralia.com.au or add a comment on the online forum Diabetes Connect, and you can also call the 1-800 number 1-800-177-055 or send an email if you'd like to be called back by an exercise physiologist, educator, or a dietitian. And I'll also, as I said earlier, I'll send that survey link around to the registrants via email in case you weren't able to see the chat or the Q&A today. All right, thanks very much, Hayley.
Yeah.
I'll see you guys later. Have a good day and a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.